Wicked for Good, the sequel to last year's hit film starring Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo, has smashed box office records. But even though it's winning at the box office, for many viewers, some of the magic seems to be missing in this installment. Bringing the stage musical second act to the screen was always going to be an uphill battle. The question now is the film really a miss? Or is it just not what some people were expecting? To uncover the truth, let's look at what worked, what didn't, how they changed the ending, and more. If you've already seen Wicked for Good, let us know your thoughts on it in the comments. Though the film is being met with many middling or even outright negative reviews, there is plenty to like about it. As with Part 1, the outstanding cast, particularly Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo, are far and away the best part of the film. This film was also thankfully unafraid of dipping into the darker tone of the second half of the musical and the book overall, instead of just trying to remake Part 1 again or take even more edge out of the story. Though it's not without its problems there, which we'll dive into in a moment. The book that the musical and thus the films is based on, Gregory Maguire's Wicked: The Life and Times of the Wicked Witch of the West, sought to take a look at the iconic story of the Wizard of Oz from a different perspective, to imagine it through the eyes of the perceived villain. The musical, in adapting that story, made Glinda's role much larger and very significantly softened the edges of the political commentary and allegories within the story. The films have done a pretty decent job of meeting in the middle of these two efforts in a way. They're definitely not as overtly political as the book, but they are willing to engage with how people are shaped by their world and, importantly, how good, when untethered from actual good deeds, can actually be a true vehicle for villainy in a deeper way than the musical did. To that end, Glinda's story is much more fleshed out here. Part 1 did well setting up what makes Glinda such a useful tool for this authoritarian regime, namely her vanity and desire to be liked. Part 2 takes this even further by bringing us back to her childhood to see how the environment she was raised in shaped her into being this way in adulthood. Glinda wants to be liked, but she also wants magic. Fearing she'll never truly be able to harness magic, she instead focuses all of her efforts on her other goal, making sure everyone loves her and she's as popular as possible. Because she feels powerless, and that she needs other people to give her power, she becomes an easy mark for the rising authoritarian regime to use to their own ends. She becomes trapped in a kind of empty power, an illusion in which she gives up any real power over herself or the skills she does have, in favor of being perceived as a great and powerful force. But it's through her connection to Elphaba that she comes to realize where her real magic lies. While Elphaba does take more of a backseat to Glinda's story in this part, what we do see of her story is still incredibly relevant and relatable. We see her continually trying to help and make the world a better place, only to time and time again be foiled or even end up feeling like she's making things worse. Her arc is a genuine feeling portrayal of how, when it comes to activism and changing the world for the better, the work that needs to be done often isn't glamorous or fun, but instead can often be thankless and demoralizing. But that willingness to keep pushing through and chipping away where she can is what allows her to eventually help spur real change. Elphaba and Glinda's friendship is the heart of the story, the main thing that keeps this film afloat. Adding more of this arc of the story into Part 2 gave them more of an opportunity to develop the friendship further and make that part of the story feel more well-rounded and lived in than it did in the quite short Act 2 of the stage musical. They show not only how the power of friendship can keep you going in dark times, but also how it can change you for the better, even if you can't stay friends forever. Her deep love for Elphaba is what finally pushes Glinda to find the courage to break out of her bubble and do the right thing, even if it isn't popular. While some might see the film as being too saccharine, there's nothing wrong with a bit of sincere optimism in dark times. The film embraces empathy and elevates the power of feeling deeply at a time when that's sorely needed. Before we break down all of the things that didn't work so well though, let's first take a look at the film's ending. To better understand what Wicked for Good's ending is trying to tell us, let's take a quick look at how it differs from the other endings within the Oz canon.
Why, my little party's just beginning.
In Frank L. Baum's 1900 children's novel, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, and the 1939 film, the Wicked Witch of the West is melted away, but it's only one part of Dorothy's story, and framed as a positive defeat of evil.
Who thought a good little girl like you could destroy my beautiful
In Maguire's book, where we experience the story through Elphaba's lens, we get a different take on these events. In a rage, Elphaba accidentally sets her own clothes on fire. Trying to put it out, Dorothy throws water on her, unaware that it would melt her. Elphaba's melting here isn't a defeat of evil at all, but instead just an unfortunate accident brought on by her intense rage and sadness over the loss of her sister and her inability to enact real change boiling over. And instead of leading to a happy ever after for Oz, the outcome is quite the opposite. With the wizard gone and no one like Elphaba who truly cares around, political turmoil engulfs the land. The stage musical, in its effort to have a more upbeat ending and story overall, changed that ending yet again. Instead of actually being melted away for good, the entire event was actually just a ruse on Elphaba's part so that she could fake her death and disappear. She wasn't melted at all, but instead just pulled off an old-school magic trick and disappeared through a trapdoor. Now free to be with Fiyero and leave Oz behind. This more positive ending is, unsurprisingly, the route Wicked for Good takes as well, with Elphaba running off to start her new secret life and Glinda taking control of Oz after the wizard flees. We also see a sign of Glinda's new power as well, as the Grimoire opens for her. One change was the choice to focus on Elphaba and Glinda's last moment of friendship even more, telling each other "I love you" before being separated forever. A moment which was apparently ad-libbed by the actors. If you want a more in-depth breakdown of the differences between all of the various versions of the story in book and on screen, make sure to check out our previous video.
If we know ourselves, we're always home.
But now, it's time to take a look at the parts of Wicked for Good that were, well, not so good. Act 2 of the stage musical has always been regarded as the less interesting and engaging part of the musical, so the decision to split the story into 2 entire films, each of which are nearly as long as the stage musical is altogether, was always going to be a risky one. More than just making everyone wait a year to see the rest of the story, we were made to wait for the part everyone likes less. So Wicked for Good seemed, if anything, destined for middling reviews. And many of the problems from Act 2 of the musical do persist, like the fact that the best songs were in the first part. And the new songs that were added for Part 2 definitely don't hold a candle to Defying Gravity or Popular. The book is a tragedy, so by going in another direction, both the musical and the film had to then alter what their story as a whole was trying to say. The musical was very deliberate in its goal of positivity and fluff throughout the entire story. The film, however, in its desire to attempt to walk the tightrope between the two, while always erring on the side of positivity, often felt like it never quite hit either side effectively. The political aspects of the film can at times feel somehow simultaneously on the nose and underbaked. In addition to the desire to avoid going too deep into anything dark, this is also partly a result of the musical and thus the film's decision to change the framing of the story, from being from Elphaba's point of view to Glinda's. We had hoped that Part 2 would dig more into the deeper sides of Elphaba's motivations and feelings, but unfortunately that isn't really the case. For Good is very much Glinda's story, and that does mean that we miss out on a lot of depth of character for Elphaba that was present in the book. Though, at the end of the day, if they had wanted to more deeply engage with the politics of the story, they would have just done an adaptation of the book. The musical already softened the edges and filed down so many of the harsher realities, so the film is just following suit. As Kathleen Newman Breeming wrote for Refinery 29, "I understand their critiques, but let's take the Wicked movies for what they are instead of what you hoped the stage musical would be. The movies were never going to be a radical reimagining of Maguire's novel because that's not what the musical is. It's a big-hearted, campy, bold, funny, entertaining ride with a strong message." Though the 2-part film has now covered the ground of the stage musical, that doesn't mean that that's all the story left to tell. The ending sent our 2 heroines off on new adventures, and it would be interesting to follow both of them on these journeys. Will Elphaba and Fiyero be able to continue to help and make small positive changes in their world from exile? Is Glinda really changed for good? Or will she go back to her old self-serving ways as she becomes more comfortable in her new power? There are also a number of books left in Maguire's series. Given how successful the films have been at the box office, it's no surprise that Universal is already thinking up ways to continue bringing Oz to the big screen. Though it seems like that might not end up being in the way we would have imagined. Instead of following Glinda or Elphaba, it seems that there's a desire to explore different parts of Oz. Stephen Schwartz, who wrote and composed all of the songs for the stage musical, told The Ankler, Winnie Holtzman and I are doing some work right now on ideas that aren't a sequel to Wicked because I think the Glinda and Elphaba story feels complete, but there are other aspects that could be explored. Not a sequel, but an adjunct. Though, while we might not be following Elphaba and Glinda's stories directly, it's possible that we'll still see them in parts in and around the main story, like was done with Dorothy's journey in these films. Wicked for Good not being a tragedy like the book isn't necessarily a bad thing. The story of friendship and how someone else's belief in you can help you learn to believe in yourself is important, especially now. It's a fun film with some great performances, especially with Ariana Grande getting to add depth and layers to Glinda's sparkle. The film, in all honesty, just never really stood much of a chance of being as good as the first film because of the source material. So it's nice that they really focused in on the good parts, the power of that central friendship, because we can all use a little help finding our own magic every once in a while. If you've already watched the film, let us know what you thought about it. Would you have preferred they did it in just one film versus two? And would you like to see a more direct adaptation of the book in the future? That's the take. Click here to watch the video we think you'll love, or here to check out a whole playlist of awesome content. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications.